Stephen King movie adaptations are not a new facet of filmmaking. Way back in the day, this caliber of movie used to dominate the box office to both critical and financial success. King is a very versatile writer, stretching his talent and prose ability across a wide array of subjects, characters, and genres. One of the elements that stands apart within his novels in particular is the characterization, where his characters move and feel like real and vulnerable people, weaknesses and all. This in turn makes it easier for audiences to identify and empathize with them and their situation, which is made all the more prevalent due in part to King's particular adaptability to write some truly terrifying stuff when he needs to. Alas, however, although King's horror-based works had dominated the imaginations of many at the box office, there are also adaptations of his regular works that managed to pack a definitive punch in terms of character depth because of the strong source material, such as the gut-wrenching honesty and poignancy of films like The Green Mile or The Shawshank Redemption. However, on the flip side, there are also Stephen King adaptations out there that just do not work. It's a hard task to adapt a novel to the big screen, especially when it's chock full of narrative depth, such as is the case with many past King properties. As such, it's hard not to approach these movies with an air of caution, having faith in the source material, yet doubting or fearing the ability of a filmmaker to truly bring that material to the big screen in a meaningful or nuanced way. And this is no exception how I approached the newest Stephen King film adaptation, The Long Walk, at my screening last week. Heading into this film, I was more than aware of the source material the film was based upon and its intricacies in terms of character development and plot. I'd actually read the novel a few months prior in preparation for the film adaptation, and I walked away sort of shocked. Granted, it is nowhere near the top of Stephen King's novels, and it is definitely plagued with all sorts of plot contrivances and issues that are too numerous to mention within this specific review. But I ultimately walked away shaken up from that novel for two key reasons. One being that the quote-unquote simple premise of a group of boys walking until only one remains was harrowing and intense through the prose style of King, in which the rambling and monotonous marching of these characters as their inner psychology and will breaks down was deeply disturbing, affecting, and depressing. And the other reason was because the novel relied entirely on complex character development in order to tell its story. You really got to understand and relate to these boys as they progress through their march, and about their personal hopes, fears, and dreams in relation to what they want to gain at the end of this walk. This in turn made their downfalls and low moments incredibly visceral and pulse-pounding, contributing to the overall sense of claustrophobia that made the novel such an unforgettable experience. Both of these elements blended together to create a wholly affecting and rattling experience on the page. But in terms of a cinematic adaptation, would it be enough to truly sell this movie on the big screen? Adapting character drama and insight from a novel to a cinematic format is not an easy task in the slightest, and there have been countless films of old that have tried this very method and faltered all the same. Yet, I held out hope in relation to the creative talent behind this film, chiefly because of J.T. Mulner's screenplay credits, of which his prior film Strange Darling had been an indie horror hit, and because of Francis Lawrence behind the director's chair, who is no stranger himself to these stories about young people pitted in a struggle to survive, if his directorial credits on the past Hunger Games series installments indicated anything. Yet, even with the abundance of talent at the film's disposal, and the intriguing marketing promising a terrifying and oppressive atmosphere, it remained to be seen whether the creative team would be able to bridge that vast gap and disparity between a novel and a film, of which many other films of this caliber have attempted and crash landed to no avail. As such, I approached this movie with an ounce of caution in my screening last week, hoping it would prove me wrong and stick a definitive landing as a quintessential Stephen King novel adaptation. Yet, alas, as you might have been able to guess so far from any of the clues left in my title, thumbnail, or overall tone of the review thus far, my review of The Long Walk is not going to be overwhelmingly positive in nature. However, this review of The Long Walk is not going to be negative. Rather, this is going to be a balanced, middle-of-the-road analysis of a film that fits into this category between the two sides with ease. This is because The Long Walk is ultimately an adaptation that is neither anything inherently special nor criminal in the slightest. Rather, it's a film that strikes a careful balance of mediocrity, which I guess can be seen as a strength in how it doesn't manage to ruin specific book moments in this regard, yet can feel frustrating because it is a novel adaptation that simultaneously feels afraid to take any creative risks outside of the source material save for the obvious options. This means I unfortunately will not be joining the critical wavelength of overwhelming praise that has been heaped upon this film thus far. Yet for all of the criticism I am about to laud on the film in key areas, I also cannot say that this is a film I would not recommend watching in theaters ultimately, as it is kind of a complicated movie in that regard. The Long Walk, much like the novel it's based upon, follows the character of Raymond Garrity, played by Cooper Hoffman, a young teen who was dropped off one day at the starting line of a contest. The rules of the contest itself are simple. Alongside other boys his age, Raymond will continue walking until only one of the contestants is left standing. If they stop for any reason, or they slow down behind a specific set speed within miles per hour, they are shot. As the contest grows ever more intense and the stakes grow more personal and prevalent by the minute, Raymond will have to battle not just his physical exhaustion and confrontation, but his mental psyche in the process as the miles stretch on and the difficulty sets in. If The Long Walk just sounds intense and grueling from the plot summary, trust me, It is. Nothing I say in this review is going to be able to truly encapsulate how intense, harrowing, and outright exhausting the cinematic experience is. And on a visceral level, it has to be commended how director Francis Lawrence adapted such material to the big screen. As soon as the boys start walking into the beginning of the film, you feel that nauseating, thudding, and quite impactful march deep within you. Whether due in part to the simulated bob of the camera as it follows the characters walking up and down, almost to simulate the movement of walking for the audience themselves, or the intense sound design that captures each and every footfall within the film with unflinching resolve, Lawrence has crafted an atmosphere and world that enthralls audiences right into the thick of the story itself and immerses them from start to finish. Yet, whereas such immersion would feel like a lucky escape for many audiences in many other film adaptations, here it's an inescapable nightmare, and that much quickly becomes apparent. You see, The Long Walk is not just a harrowing and exhausting experience in and of itself, but this wearisome and tiring tone and atmosphere comes coupled with intense moments of brutality and unflinching violence that pack a genuine punch and shock audiences to their core. As someone who had read the novel beforehand, I thought I was prepared for a lot of the bloodshed and intensity on display, but within the first few minutes of the movie alone, the film really lets you know what type of style it's seeking to capture in such a gratuitous and mean-spirited way. The violence here packs so many layers within its graphic nature, whether from a style standpoint, a thematic standpoint, or even just a weight standpoint itself. It's a film where you might find yourself looking away from the screening portions with how far this is willing to push the envelope, and how clear of a front seat view it provides audiences to this cutthroat and intense world. However, there's an interesting facet of this gratuitous content that has to be explored here as well in this conversation. And unfortunately, it is going to be slightly more negative in contemplation. You see, there is no doubt about it that this is a graphic and intense film visually from a violence standpoint. But the interesting conundrum about The Long Walk and its violence is how this violence doesn't really seem to make any lasting impact overall. Don't get me wrong, these moments are incredibly intense and scarring in the moment, but the impact of these sequences and the lasting memory of these characters and their fates do not stay with audiences for any extended period of time in order to really sell that emotional connection. After watching the film, I truthfully started to mull over this to try to discover or contemplate why this exactly was. And the answer I arrived at is in relation to one of the key differences between this film adaptation and its source material, which feels almost like a fundamental oversight on the filmmaker's part and truthfully removes so much of the impact these moments otherwise would have carried in spades. And this is because the novel takes the time to explore characters and their dynamics, feelings, and emotions in depth, and the film does not do this. Part of the reason why the novel feels so intense and depressing regardless of format is because King is an author that understands a simple narrative principle that if audiences feel for or empathize with characters in any regard, it will make what happens to them 10 times more powerful or impactful. And this is a technique that King used to great effect within the novel itself, as within those pages we actually got to understand these characters and their personal beliefs and ideas in relation to what they would personally do with the prose on a fundamental level. However, this important context went beyond just establishing these characters as individual in nature, and more into portraying these characters as what they truly were, scared kids who signed up for this contest out of desperation in order to help the people they loved. And on this level, the hidden symbolism of the novel becomes abundantly clear. Some see the novel as a clear metaphor for the Vietnam War, in which King wrote the novel during this time period, in which the monotonous marching of these characters through a desolate place, coupled with their drive and passion to sign up for something out of this nature of wanting to do the right thing, mirrored the experiences of soldiers within this time period. Yet it's through this specific adaptation in the cinematic format where you lose so much of that thematic nuance and complexity, which makes the result feel half-baked and underdeveloped at times in comparison. You miss so many of those themes and ideas in relation to the juxtaposition of war, and you also lose so much of the character development that made each unflinching moment of devastation feel so important and impactful. None of the supporting characters in the novel are given anything complex to work with here. The film doesn't explore their identities, ideas, or emotions in depth, instead delegating the supporting cast to the thankless role of many other supporting casts within horror-based media of the past, serving as little more than to add to the total kill count at the film's end. The only two characters that are explored in depth here are David Johnson's Peter McVries and Hoffman's Raymond Garrity, whose dynamic drives so much of the film's plot forward with ease. Yet because of this, it becomes easy for viewers who are not familiar with the source material to guess where the plot is headed because they are the only two characters who are instilled with an ounce of depth or nuance. I understand it is a supremely difficult task to pull character-driven drama and dynamics to a cinematic format from a novel, yet the script here feels like it sacrifices so much of this for no reason. When speaking about departures from the source material to this adaptation, it also has to be mentioned how the ending of the film itself has been changed in such a drastic manner. The original novel's ending was haunting to say the least. A grim meditation on the human mind that felt quietly devastating in impact and execution. The film's ending in comparison is sort of that, until it's really not. Look, I'm not one of those diehard book fans who scoffs at the idea of change in relation to source material adaptations. And in fact, for this particular film, I approached this with an open mind. And as the third act of the film fast approached, I actually found myself liking the direction the ending was taking, as it felt so shocking and jarring, perfectly in line with the core focus and idea of the story and what it tries to achieve. And then, The ending takes a drastic and quite simplistic turn. Instead of remaining in that meditative and thought-provoking space, the film once again nosedives into derivative territory with a baffling thematic twist that just feels so mainstream and watered down in comparison. And it feels that the intense and complex idea that was being built up and set up has been sacrificed in favor of something that will play as a quote-unquote safe for audiences. And that is ultimately where my main issues with a film like The Long Walk lie. For a film that is reliant on intense source material and oppressive violence to sell its impact, it feels surprisingly constrained and somewhat limited in scope, which holds back some of its effectiveness at the end of the day. It's an odd adaptation in how it approaches changes to the novel, and ultimately comes across as sort of a Cliff Notes version in relation to the novel's hidden complexities and strengths. After a slow first 30 minutes, the film's pacing picks up considerably to deliver an enthralling and intense spectacle unlike anything I can confidently say I've seen within the cinematic medium thus far this year. But does it ultimately leave audiences with anything motivated or nuanced to ponder over long after the credits roll? This isn't to say that The Long Walk is a film based entirely without merit, however. As mentioned, the inner characterization and dynamic between the two leads, which are Peter McVries and Raymond Garrity, is explored through incredible moments of dialogue and soulful performances from Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson, who are the best part of this movie by far. They both instill such a lively and kinetic nature into their characters, leaning into that lighthearted banter and wit when the film's material calls for it, yet also drawing strength to deliver some of the film's more heart-wrenching moments as well. One of the strengths of The Long Walk is how it goes the extra mile in portraying these characters and leads as gruff or stern on the exterior, while also underlying the fact that they are truthfully very young within, which is conveyed expertly by these two lead characters in so many poignant and deeply affecting moments throughout. As mentioned, the filmmaking from Francis Lawrence here is wholly invigorating and immersive, and it really just transports audiences alongside these characters on their walk and its brutality. The music score from the Lumineers co-founder Jeremiah Freites is a soulful and melancholic, underlying so many of the film's more intimate moments with a backing track that instills and highlights so many of the poignant flourishes within the film. And even though the impact feels lessened here in relation to the source material, it is a film where you ultimately walk away incredibly moved and impacted by what you have just witnessed. And on that level, I find it necessary to provide potential audience members watching this video a word of warning. If you are looking for a straightforward horror/thriller like the advertisements and marketing have promised thus far, this is not going to be the film for you. Rather, it's a quieter, more intense, deeply depressing, and really saddening film that feels more depressing or disturbing or sad than it does scary or cutthroat. This is not a feel-good movie in the slightest, although it feels like that goes without saying. And audiences need to properly prepare themselves in their headspace in order to embark on this journey because there is a lot to ponder and grapple with within its runtime. And on that level, the meticulous pacing and storyline is not going to be everyone's cup of tea either within the specific genre. Yet, for all of my personal qualms and problems with The Long Walk, I can't ultimately say that it's a terrible movie. Yet, it's also not amazing either. It sits somewhere in the middle of the road for me. Neither interesting enough nor forgettable enough to tip the scale in either favor. It provides audiences exactly what they expect and nothing more. Yet, this can also be seen to the film's fault as well. Ultimately, prospective audiences are going to want to know whether The Long Walk is an experience that they want to embark on this weekend and beyond within theaters. And ultimately, such a complex question really does require a nuanced answer. And my specific answer within this realm would be, it's gonna depend. I can't see many fans of the source material being won over by some of the narrative departures here, although some of them do work for the film's favor somewhat, even if the majority don't. And audiences who aren't familiar with the source material might not be prepared for how intense, cutthroat, and overall depressing this film can get at moments in relation to its oppressive and heavy atmosphere. It is hard to call The Long Walk an entertaining movie in the slightest, as it seems anything but. It holds your attention, but in a way that feels more like a drawn-out and inescapable nightmare full of exhausting fatigue and tension than it does anything inherently unique and enthralling. Yet, although I personally wasn't won over by the execution of material here overall, it stands to reason that there might be a few individuals within the prospective audience out there who walk away from a film like The Long Walk emboldened to make a positive change in the world after viewing the brutality and harshness of this world on display. And on that level, it stands to reason that The Long Walk is worth a watch at least once if you are interested. Repeat viewings, however, do not seem as likely. And it does stand to reason that there have been many other horror-based entries within the box office landscape recently that are better suited for an overall cinematic experience more than this one is. That's why I'm giving The Long Walk a 3 out of 5 stars. The Long Walk is in theaters everywhere this Friday. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this review on my channel. If you're new around here and you like the content you see, don't forget to click that subscribe button down below, like the video, and turn on push notifications. Also, leave comment suggestions down below for future video, essay, and review topics. With that being said, until next time, this is Mitchell signing off. Peace out.